Hi. Not all years will be that easy, but 1985 sure is. Super Mario Bros. The game that single-handedly created the entire side-scrolling platformer genre and done it in style no less. I mean, where else would you get to live out your dream of going from rags to riches? Playing as a simple plumber, storming castle after castle, seeking poor, kidnapped by the evil Bowser, Princess Peach, and all of that to save her, and in the process find your way into her heart, her high-class social circles, her pimped-up castle, and perhaps even her undergarments. The formula was simple. Run left to right, jump on or over bodies, collect coins, don't die, yeah, that's the point of it all too, and save the damsel in distress. And simple proved to be both fun and successful. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. With these two short sentences, The Legend of Zelda on NES taught us three things in 1986. That it was the first of its kind action-adventure game that countless other titles followed, copied and ripped off for many years after. That not all games have to be about shooting, jumping, racing or bubble popping, and there's space for one, that's a grand adventure too. And finally, that it is indeed dangerous in the forest full of monsters, and you should never go alone. Well, unless you've no other choice. Then let's hope you know some kind of a Miyagi-san looking old fellow willing to give you his sword. The Legend of Zelda may appear incredibly simplistic and devoid of content by today's standards, but if you look at how video gaming evolved over the years, then without it, we wouldn't have the most of these open-world action role-playing games that we all love so much. Its existence was fundamental in games becoming what they are today. Talking about the games that changed the world, one cannot not mention 1987's Maniac Mansion. It's definitely not the first game taking place in an old, rundown and cobwebs-covered mansion. It's also not the first in which you have to save your beloved. And most of all, it's not even the first adventure game ever made. But what it is the first real point-and-click adventure. It took what we knew from other mystery and puzzles-filled titles and remade it from ground up. Gone were the terrible text parser and walls of text, and instead we've gotten super ergonomic, verb-based interface, beautiful animated graphics, and we were thrown straight into the story to take an active part in it and not just observe or read about it. And playing as Dave and his couple of friends, trying to save Sandy from a creepy family living in an old, remote, haunted-looking house was like being a part of a movie. Pool of Radiance was the first ever digital Advanced Dungeons & Dragons system implementation, and boy oh boy, was it an awesome one. I mean, sure, it was based on the first iteration of it, so certain quality of life things that we're used to by now were not there, but it allowed you to embark on an adventure, nay, an entire campaign, same as you would with a group of your nerdy friends in your kitchen. And while arguably playing with people is always more fun, playing with them requires all of them to be available at the same time and be in the same location, which is not always possible. But you know what's always available in there? Your computer. And if you had this gem of a game, your next big adventure was literally just a key press away, and you could always jump in and lay justice to fantasy monsters with your party of braves. The fact that the combat was tactical and turn-based made this already amazing game a must-have for all the geeks of 1988. '89 had some sweet releases. I mean Super Mario Land, Prince of Persia, Final Fight, or even the more cinematic and B-movie feeling game than anything else that came before. It came from the desert. And yet as cool as all these were, they did not shape the gaming landscape as much as a little title known as SimCity. It was the first in the long-running series, sure, the simplest of them all, sure, and hella ugly looking as compared to games in other genres, also sure, but if you were someone who likes to manage things, who enjoys simulating stuff and min-maxing it to the extreme, then in many ways there were no better games released that year. SimCity allowed you to build, expand and manage your own city. See it grow, evolve or even collapse under the weight of your bad choices. It was excellent and started the entire genre of games that only got better and better with each next release. Some of you may wonder why I've picked The Secret of the Monkey Island as a game for 1990. I mean, surely, I could have gone for one of the newest and most immersive by then genre of space shooters with Wing Commander, or even focus on F-Zero and how it evolved racing to go beyond the cars and into the super fast hovercraft. I could, and these were both fun. But LucasArts have done something huge again. What they started with Maniac Mansion, they've perfected with the Monkey Island, creating one of the most iconic adventure games ever made. and one that is quoted by many devs to this day as an inspiration for the games that they make. It mixed beautiful graphics and sounds, fun to follow and action-packed adventure plot, interesting and often very creative out-of-the-box puzzles, and a lot of cringe jokes that most of us love so much. Monkey Island is probably the only game that I know of that became an instant classic on the very day of its release. Sid Meier is a man whose name adorns more game box covers and video game title screens than any other person in existence. There's a good reason for that, but it's not the video to cover that subject. All you need to know though is that if you see his name somewhere, chances are that the game it's on is either fantastic or groundbreaking and often ahead of its time. And Sid Meier's Civilization is of the earlier kind. It's another of those genre starters that changed the world. In essence, it's a game in which you lead your chosen nation from ancient times all the way into the future. You decide how they evolve, what and when they study and research, how the nation expands, building cities and improving terrain, and even participate in wars. Those that you started and those you have to defend yourself in. It's a larger-than-life title that aged like fine wine. So it's great to ponder about how it still tastes like, but opening the bottle today, after so many years, may be risky, and you're better off trying one of the later, younger wines. While 1991's Street Fighter II is credited for being the first good and quote-unquote modern versus fighting game, it's the year later Street Fighter II Turbo that stormed the arcades all around the world, squeezing money from pockets of everyone, kids, teens and grown-ups alike. In the eyes of the game, we were all equal. It didn't care for our races, genders, age or social statuses, only how good we were at it. And it Yuga fired, Hadoukened and Shoryukened us all over the screen when playing against a more skilled gamer. People were lining up for a chance to be uppercutted and bicycle kicked by these game masters, and they loved it. It was a worldwide phenomenon that spawned hundreds of copycat titles and even some of its own most fierce competitors like Mortal Kombat. Its importance in gaming is unquestionable. Do you remember how before the FPS genre was defined we used to call all these similarly playing games Doom clones? Yep, that's how important Doom is. It was not the first title focusing on playing from first-person view in fluid motion action-packed format, and neither was its earlier year prior's older brother, Wolfenstein 3D. But what Doom did is gathered all the ideas other titles introduced, so the viewpoint, alien/demonic enemies, blood, a lot of it actually, iconic weapons and a tougher than a politician's skull protagonist. And it polished them all into this single perfect game that managed to pull it all off, in one title, under one roof, and on screens of our home computers. Doom changed the world forever, and despite its inherent violence, I believe that it did for the better. Under a Killing Moon did two pretty cool things when it released in 1994. First of all, it proved that the FMV adventure games can be damn fine pieces of digital entertainment when done well. And secondly, that we really didn't need FMV games. Like at all. I mean, other titles did much more to support that notion, but there's a reason why the tech didn't progress much since then and why there's very few of these games today. The game tells a tale of a down-on-luck PI living in a futuristic post-World War III San Francisco. He's sarcastic, morose, tired of life, and he's not ready for having to be responsible for dealing with a very powerful cult. Despite being an FMV release, Under a Killing Moon influenced countless other games that came after with its perfect pacing, fun and engaging story, and unbeatable atmosphere. I have a friend who doesn't like worms. The video is not about him, naturally, but I just wanted to let you know that I do in fact not the only person in existence who doesn't. And that's not nothing. Worms is a game that grew from the idea started off by a little game known as Artillery, then expanded upon by numerous clones, Scorched Earth being the most notable of them all, offering dozens of weapons, useful tools for the players to use, and more than 2-player multiplayer. But Worms have not only done it all too, but also done it all right. It made the weapons not only powerful but also innovative and fun to use. It allowed Worms to move around the map, adding a lot to the strategy, and allowed you to create your own levels or use a randomizer. Though that actually depended on the version of the game. And while all of that is cool and all, the most important thing that it did is injecting the soul into the simple idea, making it an international hit. Before Lara Croft in Tomb Raider, the two iconic hotties of video gaming were Miss Pac-Man and Samus from Metroid respectively. And while Lara did want both, with her triangle boobs of justice and square butt that just never gave up, it was not her looks that made her game so iconic. Nope, it was the accent. No, also not it, but I thought it was worth trying. 1996's Tomb Raider was the first game that successfully recreated a true Indiana Jones-like experience within the simulated game world environment in 3D. And let me tell you, it was something else. All the smooth running, jumping, climbing, diving, the wolves, bats, dinosaurs, weapons that you had and could use, and the puzzles, everything. Guys, chef's kiss. It was a hell of a game and everyone played it. It's also one conceptually responsible for all the later 3D action-adventure games like Uncharted, God of War, or The Last of Us. It's a treasure. Final Fantasy VII is a huge, epic JRPG adventure that sees a group of young heroes, Cloud Strife, Barret, Tifa and few others, take on the villain of the game Sephiroth and the Shannara Corporation, all to prevent them from destroying the world. Final Fantasy VII became a worldwide phenomenon because it played all of its cards right. It offered huge-ass, larger-than-life story, memorable and believable characters, breathtaking and unique, steampunk-adjacent world, and a fantastic combat system. All of that naturally presented in beautiful 3D graphics, mixing pre-rendered backgrounds with real-time rendered characters and an unforgettable sound and music design. Final Fantasy VII stole hearts of millions, and it's not a surprise why. Released exactly 10 years after Pool of Radiance, Baldur's Gate is a game that resurrected, revitalized and repopularized, all in one go no less, the AD&D mechanics in video game format once again. It is set in the world of Forgotten Realms and uses 2nd edition AD&D rule set. It's a party-based top-down adventure in which you're an adopted child of a well-known mage Gorion. When the unknown forces storm Baldur's Gate, looking for you in particular, despite you being pretty average and unspectacular teen, Gorion rushes the both of you to escape the city. Sadly, during the daring escape, he is killed. From then onwards, you must assemble a team, find forces responsible for his demise and learn the truth about your origin and destiny. Baldur's Gate reignited the flame that's been slowly but gradually dying off in the hearts of RPG gamers, turning it into a fire that took the genre from 1998 into the future. Everyone I knew in 1999 played Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Some played it more, to the point that they would bring up most school conversation during recess onto the subject, talking dragons, fairies, behemoths and the likes, others less so, only having superficial knowledge of its deeper mechanics, but everyone did. And it's not a surprise, as it was one of the most fun and replayable multiplayer fantasy strategies of the time. It mixed exploration and discovery of the lands of the Erathia with kingdom, cities and armies management and turn-based tactical side-view combat. And it done it all with such grace and ease that no other similar game or even its own numerous follow-ups ever came close to its quality. It's a title that defined its subgenre when it came out and still receives maps and mods released for it over 25 years later. The original Diablo was what many consider to be the first true modern hack-and-slash action RPG. Others started a long and pointless debate about it being or not an RPG at all, and instead of playing games they liked, focused on bashing those that others did. The important thing was that Blizzard released it, it became very popular, and many people fell in love with its loop, or its music design, which was unlike anything else. So, when the second Diablo was announced, saying that the expectations of gamers were considerable was an understatement. Unfortunately, back then still Blizzard and not Activision Blizzard more than delivered. The game was considerably larger, it featured many open maps, dozens of different enemies, tons of new bosses big and small, and more loot than you could ever find a use for. And it was also the downfall of its own IP, and no other entry in the series ever came close to its popularity. Now why did I pick Halo Combat Evolved for 2001 and not likes of Max Payne, Silent Hill 2, Gothic or even Grand Theft Auto 3? Well, because I think it was the most important game of them all. And for two reasons no less. First of all, it mixed an excellent single-player campaign following the toughest of the tough protagonist, Master Chief, in the war against the Covenant, an aggressive and hella dangerous alien species. For two, while the internet was nothing new and not in its infancy either, and most of us were daily users of it and were well versed with online gaming for quite a while, that was on PC. On consoles, it was not something you expected, it was something you sometimes received, and usually poorly implemented. Halo changed all of that. Online games were fast, action-packed, smooth-running and incredibly easy to run, and at the time, one of the best ways of spending your time online. Arena was a very innovative and ahead of its time title. Daggerfall was huge, ambitious and rewarding if you managed to make yourself play it, despite its numerous shortcomings. But Morrowind? Well, with Morrowind Bethesda learned its lessons. It was a considerably smaller, more contained and handcrafted feeling game, while still being very big in scope and content as compared to other games on the market. Its first-person combat and magic were considerably polished and less painful to use than in earlier entries, and its main story and side quests were probably the best Bethesda has ever made. It was a culmination of years of experience and a game that they wanted to make with the earlier two, but lacked technology and know-how. Morrowind may have never reached the popularity of Skyrim, but arguably it could be considered to be even more important, as it was a proof of concept that actually worked as intended and was not just a mishmash of fun and futuristic game design ideas. When Call of Duty came out, the entire world forgot about all those Quakes, Dooms, Duke Nukem 3Ds or any other arena shooters. Everyone wanted to play Call of Duty as its historical military campaigns were at the time considered to be the most realistic depiction of the first-person perspective war conflict ever made. And the 32-player massive multiplayer battles that it offered were not only really fun but also laid out the building blocks for all the future online military shooters to expand upon. Call of Duty was a groundbreaking game, even if not one for me. While I would have picked Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, SimCity 4 or even Need for Speed Underground for the title of the year, I could not name either and stay objective to what I aimed to do with this video. So Call of Duty it is. I think of World of Warcraft as the most important game of the third generation of online MMOs. The first were the MATs, then there was Ultima Online and the games similar to it. And World of Warcraft, well, it was/is a third-generation phenomenon. It's not only one of the very few games from back then that are still alive, but its servers are bustling with crowds of hungry for adventure gamers and millions of them log on each day to hunt for the loot, to complete the dungeons or even to just hang out with their online friends. And while it received countless refreshes, expansion packs, fixes and facelifts over the years, under the hood it's still the same game that it was in 2004. And one that truly launched the whole early 2000s MMORPG fever that saw them releasing in considerable numbers nearly every single year. Today, most of them are a footnote on a gaming history, and World of Warcraft is as strong as ever. Guitar Hero succeeded as a game, nay, as series, and as a genre starter too. And all of that for one simple reason only: it was fun. Yes, that was a secret to its success, and that's how it's done it. It took what everyone loves, music, plastered it with a fun-to-use and unusual controller, initially a guitar with subsequent releases adding other instruments too, and packed the CD to the brim with cool songs. Mixed it all nicely together, shook it once or twice, and served with lemon, straw, over ice naturally, and based on a very easy to get into and challenging to master rhythm game mechanics. It was such a simple and foolproof idea that I'm honestly surprised that no one came up with it before, at least not successfully. Point is, Guitar Hero did, and in doing so created a new genre. One that perhaps quickly faded into non-existence, but for the time that it lived and filled our rooms with music, it was a very loud one indeed. Gears of War was arguably Xbox 360's biggest hit and a system seller. And no wonder, as it was a fantastic two-player cooperative third-person shooter that was done with a lot of care and attention to detail, and designed from ground up to be as much fun as it was possible, that it failing was just borderline impossible. And the fact that it also sported incredible for the time next-gen feeling presentation only made it even more enticing. Gears of War was not the first third-person cover shooter, mind you, but it was the one that redefined the entire genre and made it what it is to this very day. It follows Marcus Phoenix of Delta Squad fighting deadly alien forces known as the Locust Horde on a fictional planet Sera to save human inhabitants living there. While the first Mass Effect is my least favorite of the original trilogy, it is arguably the most important of them all, because it started this huge, universe-spanning epic, the struggle for survival of many species that would culminate many years later with the third game. Same as Gears of War, Mass Effect is also a third-person cover shooter. But unlike Gears, it's not all that it is, and it's only how its combat is mechanically resolving. because most of all, Mass Effect is a sci-fi role-playing adventure on a truly grand scale, with hours upon hours of dialogues, cutscenes, numerous side quests, different characters that you can get to meet, work with, talk to, romance, and kill. It's a space opera told from the perspective of the main actor, and one that's as exciting as hardly any other game could ever hope to be. It's a masterpiece in pacing, in storytelling, and in keeping you glued to your screen like a boob. It's also full of bugs and terrible mechanics, but given how great it is, you'll hardly ever notice. How I wish I could include Fallout New Vegas or 2 in this video. Unfortunately, other, objectively more important games released in their east, and so I couldn't. But while 2008 was anything but devoid of fun releases, fortunately, even if nowhere near my favorite, Fallout 3 was easily the most important game that dropped that year. And since it's not 4 or 76, I have a lot of respect for it. It's the first ever Fallout in full 3D made using the same engine that powered Oblivion. And while it's easy to consider it a terrible engine for a shooter, and it is, I think so too, Fallout 3, despite what it may look like and how most of its combat encounters resolve, is first and foremost a pretty sweet post-apocalyptic sci-fi RPG. In Fallout 3 you're a young member of a Vault 101, whose father unexpectedly leaves the vault in secrecy on your 19th birthday. Your task is initially to go out into the wasteland and find him, but soon enough will become something much grander, and the fate of the entire wasteland may in fact lay in your capable hands. You may dislike, hate, despise or even ignore League of Legends or its toxic community, and to some degree I do too. But it changes nothing, and it's not only a game that redefined its genre, even if it was Dota that made it what it is, but also became the most popular game in it. And to this day, LOL is one of the most important titles in esports and, well, dare I say it here, I think I will. And it's a fun game if you're in a fun group and playing against equally as fun opponents. It's very easy to call it stupid or simplistic, to disregard it as a mutated offshoot of RTS that should be killed off long ago, but in reality, it is not. It's surprisingly addictive, strategic, and requires a lot of skill to do good in it. Is it plagued by egotistic and hormone-buzzing teens with nothing to offer other than abuse and toxicity? Sadly it is, but it doesn't make it any less of a game. I remember watching Paul Soares Jr. playing Minecraft on his channel in like 2009, 2010, I don't remember when exactly, but it was when it was still playable in a browser too. And boy oh boy, did I get hooked in. It was a game unlike anything else, and more original than everything else that came out in 2010. And yes, I do mean Red Dead Redemption, StarCraft 2, Mass Effect 2, and unfortunately also my most favorite game ever, Fallout New Vegas. Minecraft was more out there, more creative, more open, just more, than either of these could ever hope to be. And I played it with two cousins of mine for hours on end. It's also probably the most fond memories that I have of playing any games with them, so you know, it's good that it was so important, as otherwise it would have seemed like a personal choice. All that said, I know that Minecraft may feel like a game for kids, and believe you me, there's been a lot of work done behind the scenes to make it appeal to that ever-growing market, but in reality it's a title for everyone, and especially for those who have vivid imagination and like to be able to make their ideas reality. It's time for a quiz. Name a game from the last 15 years that is most likely to have ports to anything with a screen and a CPU. Did you say Tetris? Good, but it's an older game. Think again. Yes, true, Bejeweled did have ports to everything, but once again, it's a bit old. Okay, you know what, I'm gonna help you. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, a crowning jewel in Bethesda's RPG efforts, has been made by fans to work on nearly everything. I think I once saw it running on a potato. And no, not a potato PC, just a potato. And it's also an epic fantasy RPG taking place in the Skyrim province of Tamriel. It's about dragons and their powers, and your role in the world that's on the brink of collapse, and it's an open-ended open-world adventure that will have you collecting cabbages, riding and dressing up horses, and picking flowers. And yes, you can do all of that in the game. There are also quests and a story, but come on, who'd lower themselves to following the quest when there's an entire world worth of flower and mushroom picking just waiting there to be conquered? XCOM Enemy Unknown is a reimagination of the 1994's original, brought up to the 2012's presentation and technology standards, and probably one of the best games ever made. It's a living proof that a turn-based squad-centric tactics game with a global strategy outer skin layer, base micromanagement underbelly, and a role-playing soldier progression heart is a beast like no other, and one most definitely worth conquering. When the game came out, it exploded on YouTube, and the sheer number of videos covering it, its playthroughs, with and without mods, and using many different modifiers just flooded the platform, and no wonder. It's a near-perfect game that can be made fully perfect within a 10-minute window of your downloading of a Long War mod, Long War Rebalanced mod, and putting it all together. There are but a few games that managed to resurrect previously dead genres. This is one of them. Grand Theft Auto V destroyed 2013. I mean, we had The Last of Us, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, Bioshock Infinite, the new and super fun Tomb Raider, Warframe, and even Path of Exile releasing during the year, and yet, as great of the games as they were, they're nothing compared to what GTA 5 did to the industry. Believe it or not, it's still sold and sells quite well for that matter, it's still solid in single player, and it's still one of the most popular games in online multiplayer. What's more, in large part in the role-playing server variety. Go figure. Rockstar truly showed with GTA 5 how big of a fucking rockstars they are and how massive their cojones are too. And they are the biggest. Both stars and balls, the whole shebang. Everything good that you've heard about the game is deserved by it, and it is, and will for a long while be, one of the most important games ever made. I have to admit something here, I suck at all Souls-likes, which is a personal pain of mine as there are a couple that I'd like to try out. But I lack either skill, or patience, or possibly both to persevere, and power through if you will, for the demanding gameplay loop and punishing boss encounters. So I understand the appeal of, and agreed that the Dark Souls 2 was the most important game released in 2014, it's not the one that I have an intimate experience with. Now Broforce, that I played to death in 2014. But Dark Souls 2? Well, I tried and failed, then tried some more, also failed, and that insane loop carried on for a while until I gave up. I do know, though, that it built on the ideas, mechanics and gameplay concepts of the first game and made them all bigger, better and even more challenging. It's a third-person fantasy punishing role-playing game that is near entirely combat-centric and relies on perfecting of blocks, dodges and exploiting of enemy weaknesses to succeed. While we were still fresh from 2011 cherishing how amazing, cool and just the best Skyrim was, and how Bethesda gave us the coolest RPG ever, a Polish developer known as CD Projekt Red released a third game in their series of third-person fantasy-themed RPGs called The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. And while the first and second were uneven, sometimes decent, sometimes average and sometimes downright annoying, this was a game that instantly made Skyrim a joke. Not only it was gigantic in size, but had this incredible story to tell of a lone monster hunter seeking his adopted and insanely powerful daughter that the entire world was after. But it also killed Skyrim with quests and choices. Meaning, it had both. Quests that were all unique and felt real and deep, and choices that actually were meaningful and impacted the world that the game took place in. Who would have ever thought that that may be important to gamers? Also, it looked as if it was released 20 years after Skyrim, despite there being only 4 between them. Witcher 3 was, is, and for the many years more will be, a stand-up title and a jewel among all RPGs. You're gonna think that I've lost it, but hear me out. Pokémon Go, or as I'd like to call it, oh no, not again, don't make me go outside game, is an augmented reality game that kicked us all in our backsides and sent us outside seeking these annoying colorful balls of fur. Pokémon Go took the world by storm, became near instant hit, and changed the way we looked at gaming forever. It may be true that today its importance is questionable if at all existent, but in 2016 and for the next few years after you could see people everywhere walking around like nobans, looking at their phones as if they were hypnotized and getting hit by random cars trying to catch them pesky Pokémon. It was theoretically an excellent idea to promote exercise and fresh air to gamers, but in reality it proved to be equally as excellent way to test the survival of the fittest theory in action. – 2017 was one of the 2 toughest years to tackle for this video, and the reason is Fortnite. And no, I'm not an avid Fortnite player, but played it a little in the past, never enough though to get any good at it. Its importance, however, is unquestionable. It polished, popularized and defined its battle royale genre. That said, I still decided on giving the year to the true star of it, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's a rich, deep and storytelling-focused adventure in a huge-ass open world, and arguably the best ever Zelda RPG made to date. It proved that for the game to be groundbreaking, it didn't have to shower the screen with special effects, filters and high-detail polygons, and the gameplay mechanics and pure fun would always defend itself. and Breath of the Wild is one of the most captivating and fun experiences that you can have if you like open-world action RPGs. I could say that the Red Dead Redemption 2 is a sequel to the first game, or that it's basically GTA in the Wild West. And while these both statements are correct, well, one of them more than the other, locking the game in such a small box would be a disservice to it. It's a third-person action-adventure game, it's a simple RPG, it's a story that you get to follow, get yourself immersed in, and drown in it at times too. And it's also an open world, a simulation of the Wild West if you will, that makes you feel as if you ended up in the West world and the androids just never rebelled and are happily following their programming all for your benefit. It's easily the best game of 2018, and I say it fully aware that some of my absolute faves, like Spider-Man, Pillars of Eternity 2, Detroit Become Human or Pathfinder Kingmaker, also released in it. If GTA 5 showed us Rockstar's status as a dev and their cojones size too, Red Dead Redemption 2 proves that they have a different side too. One that can tell stories that are not only action-packed but also can be touching, leave you feeling conflicted or disappointed in your own choices. Remember what I said about Breath of the Wild? Okay, then apply it to Disco Elysium, short of that open world. It's a game that I only see people reacting to in one of two ways if given a chance to interact with it. They will either drop it like a hot potato as it will bore them to death with near infinite number of lines of text, or it will enchant them, lure them in, and offer an experience like hardly any other game could. It's mad, it's crazy and often touching detective/mystery type of a story that's a role-playing game for people who like to roleplay and not necessarily roleplay combat. Meaning that there are encounters in it from time to time, but they're there just to add to the story and not for the story to lean on, if you know what I'm saying. It will make you think, it will make you rethink what you think, and when you finally end up forming an opinion about something, often a very true-to-life, personal subject, it will kick you in the balls and make you rethink it again. It's a story about society, about our roles in it, and most of all, it's a story about you and your choices if you're given the chance to make them.
I think you said it had been giving you shit ever since you got there.
Fix side.
And we're finally at the second of the most difficult choices that I had to make for the video. This time, there are two reasons. First is the importance of Animal Crossing New Horizons and especially what it meant to millions of gamers throughout the whole pandemic lockdown that many had to go through. And the second is Cyberpunk 2077's terrible, awful and despicable launch. And yet, I still landed on it and not on a cute and colorful game that did everything right. And why, you may wonder? Because for all the wrongs, mistakes, lies, broken mechanics and promises that Cyberpunk is responsible for, oh my days, it is hell of a game. I mean, setting aside its incredible comeback from being the most hated game ever, that's definitely worth a story of its own, this game is just mind-blowing. It's a futuristic first-person RPG told from the perspective of a shooter, in which you're a person who's literally dying. Yup, not only you are, but also your chances of survival are basically non-existent. And yet, you're still clinging to the life with all your might, never letting go, but also never allowing yourself to stop. It's a collection of amazing, breathtaking and near-tear-inducing character stories of random NPCs, our protagonist or his/her companions, and they will make you feel things, and it's not something you expect from a game like that. So every time they do, they feel as if you were hit by a truck for no reason, not even standing on the road. The story of Judy Alvarez is probably my favorite, but all of them are worth experiencing. And yes, I said nothing about the game and only what it meant to me, and that's how good it is. Forza Horizon 5 and Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous are two of my most favorite games in their respective genres. And I don't mean like top 20 at best, I mean like top 5 at worst. They're both incredible and worth numerous playthroughs. And yet, neither of them is on your screen now. And instead you're looking at something that looks as if it was made in Flash 15 years earlier. And I know, I've made the choice, and I still think it was the right one. Because if we've learned anything in the early 2020s, with many big companies failing to sell games, quadruple A fiascos or microtransaction and loot boxes hell, is that indie devs know what we want, know what they want, and are still somehow magically capable of finding a middle ground without leaving us standing in a pile of poop. And Vampire Survivors is an excellent example of that, as it's a game in which you only control your character's movements. Well, you occasionally pick upgrades for him too, but you do nothing else. You don't press any buttons, you don't aim or shoot, you just walk around. And the crazy addictiveness of it comes from you making the right choices and learning how to move efficiently. It's a devilishly simple game mechanically, but boy oh boy, it was so much more fun than Far Cry 6. 2022 was the year of the Elden Ring. I'm not disputing that, it was easily the biggest and most popular release of the year. It was also just another game from Software and another third-person combat-centric action RPG. So I think that A Plague Tale Requiem was a much better and more suiting pick. It's a game that did a lot by doing very little. In theory, it has two things to offer. An amazing magic-like tech that allows it to display up to 300,000 moving rats on the screen at once, and its story with some not too demanding puzzles to boot. And while the rats thing is pretty impressive, I gotta admit that, it's only a part of the reason for the game being here. Plague Tale Requiem is a game told from a perspective of two kids, a teenage girl and her much younger brother. It's also a game that is set in an awful, terrible, horrendous world and time that you would not wish on your worst enemy. It's a powerful, emotional tale that will no doubt strike a chord more than once in between its perfectly crafted gameplay segments. And it will flawlessly, without fail, teach you how to be a better person by never telling you how to do it. It's often touching, it's mostly sad, but it's always fun to play, even if it's not the haha kind of an interpretation of the world. Baldur's Gate 3 has done it again. It not only brought light onto its turn-based party-centric RPG genre, but it's done it in a way that not many can rival. And it's probably only Pillars of Eternity, Pathfinder and Divinity Original Sin games that can be compared to it. The original Sin games are made by the same dev, so it's, the least of surprises here. The story of the game is excellent, keeps you on your toes, and same as Cyberpunk, starts you off with a counter to when you die. It reaches far and deep into the lore of previous titles and serves you an adventure in which you're always feeling as if you were fighting against an overwhelming odds while never willing to give up and always seeing the reason to carry on. The quests, main and side, are all super fun to complete, and the choices, both big and small, seem to matter. And the characters that you meet, talk to, or even add to your party are all interesting and feel unique. Baldur's Gate 3 is not the best tactical turn-based fantasy RPG that I've played, but it's definitely the most polished and biggest budget one, and the most important game of 2023. If December would never happen in 2024, my choice for the most important game of the year would go to Balatro. It injected much needed refresh shot of roguelike into classic poker and made it an instantly addicting game. It's also an indie title, so more power to the people or whatever. Still, as we know by now in January, December did happen. And in December, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle released, and it was hands down the best game of the entire year. And it secured its spot with a few correct moves. It released as a single-player mainly experience, not trying to make you crafty or fun by introducing others. It offered compelling, rewarding but not too difficult puzzles, a fantastic, even if a bit out there story, and while it has combat, it's not something that it encourages you to use as your go-to to solve problems. Well, outside of few mandatory boss fights, that is. It features a fun, even if not overly complicated stealth system too, which is always a plus. Most importantly, however, it proved that even if not in the movies, we can still get a good indie adventure in games. I have to admit that when I came up with the idea for this video, in a shower no less, I thought it would be a fun and easy to make one, with a lot of awesome games and much less research and fact-checking than I usually have to do. Well, I was right about one thing. It's stacked with amazing titles, but coming up with choices when trying to be objective was more difficult than I'd ever imagined. Many, if not most of my absolute faves, never made the cut. I mean, they are often hidden somewhere in the honorable mentions, but I just couldn't give them the top spots. Also, the sheer number of stellar releases that I had to dig through was just a nightmare. And yes, I mean it, nightmare. Because some of those years were so chock full of games that having to pick between them and decide which one was the most important to all gamers and the industry seemed near impossible. I originally planned on spending a couple of hours only on the list, just to land on particular games for each year, and it took me the entire day. If you liked the video, click that thumbs up button, and make sure to hit the bell and subscribe when you're down there too, to always be notified when I release something new. For me, however, this is all, so take care of yourself, eat good food, and play games. Preferably all at once.